What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 159 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello.
Hello, Steve. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
More Xbox news this week.
I was going to say, did we talk Xbox last week? I think we did, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. It was Halo and Starfield and, you know, how the studios are doing. And this week it's all about hardware because...
You know what? This kind of lines up with what we've been talking about on the Steam Deck podcast as well. Like, you know, is this they're in there as well as the same? So if you've not been listening to the Steam Deck podcast, you should definitely go check that out.
Yeah, even if you don't own a Steam Deck, we have good conversations over there. And yeah, we were talking last week about, I guess the last couple of weeks about kind of what's been going on with Valve and, you know, them moving towards this like general release for Steam OS and, you know, this kind of future of them trying to have your Steam library kind of exist wherever you are, right? And like this thing that can move and shake with you. And we've known that was Xbox's plan for a couple of years, but we have a pretty major update in that regard if this report ends up coming to pass, right? Which is that Xbox Cloud Gaming, as of next month, should be rolling out the ability for you to stream your own games. And it's originally going to be just for, Xbox, the early access, what's it called? Preview, right?
Early access preview.
I forget what it's called. They have that channel where like they put out new features. Insider, yeah. Xbox Insider. Thank you. And so it seems like it's going to be limited to Xbox Insiders at first, and then they're going to start rolling it out to everybody. But this all comes from a report from The Verge, and their sources are saying that they're going to be testing it in November. So whether or not, you know, the wide release is available to everybody in the next, you know, few months, maybe that's an early next year thing. That obviously remains to be seen. But, you know, I know you and I are both Xbox insiders, so like we could theoretically be testing this in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and anyone can sign up if you're not familiar. It's just an app you download on your Xbox and you can choose to enroll. You'll need to probably do a couple of surveys. It's usually one a week, and then eventually they unlock like beta access for you, so you can become a beta member, install beta software, and access new features like this. So it's definitely worth checking out if you want to be kind of on that bleeding edge and check out these new features. I kind of feel like I'd completely forgot that this wasn't a thing.
It was supposed to come on two different occasions. It was supposed to come in 2020, and then I think again in 2021. And yeah, we're just finally seeing it come to fruition now.
Yeah, I guess this is a significant amount of work. Like it's been codenamed Project Lapland, and yeah, it looks like they've had to put a shitload of work in behind the scenes, because rather than what you can do currently, which is basically you connect to an Xbox in the cloud and it's got a bunch of games pre-installed on it. It's all of the games that are on Game Pass, so you can play them. They've got to somehow have it a whole library of games and it connect you to the correct game that you own, prove that you've got a license for it, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But there's another angle to it, right? That you can actually purchase these games in the app now.
Yeah, so this is, I think, why you're probably actually seeing this come to fruition now, is that if you guys aren't aware, there was a court ruling like just this past week that has forced Google to stop requiring apps to be sold through Google Play billing and the Google Play Store. And that's going to be as of November 1st. So that's a major change, right? It's not dissimilar from the lawsuit that we saw Epic and Apple go through, right? And basically this is going to enable Xbox to release their own Xbox, rather than release their own, they have the Xbox app, and you'll be able to start buying games directly from there, and then you'll be able to, with Xbox Cloud Gaming, play them on any Android-capable device. So we actually had a quote from Sarah Bond where she said, starting in November, players will be able to play and purchase Xbox games directly from the Xbox app on Android. And they basically, you know, summarizing it, right, the Verge is saying that, like, once we hit 1.0 on this and everybody has access to this cloud gaming feature, you'll be able to buy basically any Xbox game. At least that's what it sounds like, right? Any of the games that are on that list that are approved. Because there are some stipulations there. Like there are some publishers are going to hold certain games back because of like licensing agreements or
Microsoft's going to have to license Call of Duty back from Ubisoft so that they can then stream it on their own service, because in the US,
in Europe, right?
Oh, in Europe, is it? I thought it was in the US, but yeah, you're probably right. In Europe, Ubisoft own the rights to it or something.
Yeah, I think it was just in the EU that they had to make that concession, but maybe you're right.
No, I think it was in the US, and in the EU, basically they had to give a free license to anyone. That's why Boosteroid could stream it.
Right.
Whereas in the US, to get it past the FTC, it was like, oh, okay, well, we'll let Ubisoft deal with that, and they're probably about to get snapped up by someone else anyway. So whoever owns Ubisoft is going to have the rights in the US for streaming of Call of Duty, which is just insane.
Very interesting. But so I mean, obviously we'll have to see, I guess, like what that ends up looking like how many games are included in that, how many of those are like the big games that people really want to play, or is it, just like the odd game here or there, right? That doesn't make it across, but yeah, I mean, basically, you'll be able to just play any Xbox game on your phone, right? And like keep the party rolling. And then they also mentioned that Microsoft's also working on a browser-based Xbox mobile store. That was supposed to come out in July. And it's going to have, it says the store will initially include deals and in-game items, but will grow to cover first-party games eventually. Microsoft said in August that testing has begun on a web-based mobile store and that, quote, work is progressing well and we will have more to share in the future. So I think that's really interesting as well, is like this idea of like,
I kind of feel like they need that, because this is only a US ruling, right? That they've got to open up billing there.
For now, anyway. Because you imagine they're probably going to go after them in other, they'll probably do this in the EU and then.
Most likely, yeah. But if Google manages to get around that in the same way Apple has, and just do it region by region, so like in the EU, you can download custom app stores. Epic Games has one, and you can download that and install Fortnite. But you can't do that in the UK, for example, because we're outside of the EU. So we're kind of stuck in just kind of Apple land. There's no global ruling on this. So I would imagine that the web store, which is how you access at the moment the cloud streaming on iOS, is you have to go to cloud.xbox.com, and then you can play the game. So I guess that store would enable them to do that without having to have an app on the phone at all. It's obviously a worse experience having to go through a web browser, but at least there's some way of doing it.
Yeah, and like you imagine that that's probably at least partly just so that like you're not limited by those kinds of restrictions, because if anybody can go on this site and buy games that then get connected to their Xbox account, then it's like doesn't matter what region you're in, right? It doesn't matter if like you want to use it through the app, you want to whatever, right? Like it's like there's a way for you to go ahead and make the purchase without somebody else taking a cut. Mm-hmm. Which is I'm sure that's the bottom line here, right? Is like trying to empower more users to get in the Xbox ecosystem. Like if you just own an iPad or an Android equivalent or whatever, right? Like
I think it's that Fire TV deal that they had where you get Fire Stick and an Xbox controller, and it had the kind of Xbox app pre-installed.
Yeah.
That then becomes that box that Phil Spencer wanted to build, that streaming box, and you can just buy any game you want and you can just play it there and then, and it's there immediately. You don't have to download it. You have instant access to it. There's no kind of waiting around. It's whether the streaming experience can be good enough for that, I think, is what remains to be seen, because I'm yet to have a solid experience with it. I've had decent experiences, but it's never been like, oh, this feels like I'm playing it natively. It always feels like I'm streaming it.
I feel like there are a lot of genres of games that it just straight up doesn't work with. At least right now, like I think if you're playing like, I don't know, like something like a Persona or something like that, where it's like turn based and you can deal with a little bit of slowdown here or there, then like more power to you. But like trying to play a shooter or a platformer or anything that's quick moment to moment and that requires like Twitch response or precision, right? Like it's just not there yet. But I mean, maybe the thought is that it's taken a leap and that's why it's time to roll something like this out, or that the quicker that you do roll it out to the people that it does work for, you can start testing. And as 5G becomes more common and higher speed internet is less and less of a a premium thing, then maybe that's the thought here. But my question is like, also with this, is this something that they're gonna keep free?
Yeah, see, I'm confused on that because I don't. If that's the case, does that diminish the value of Game Pass, or
don't you need to have Game Pass to use this? I was gonna say, right?
Do I have to have Game Pass Ultimate in order to access the streaming, and then I'm just buying games on top? In which case, that seems like less of a good deal to me. But I guess you've got to pay them something in order to stream it, because they've got to keep the servers up and running.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard for me to say, because I think if it's something that you can use on any tier of Game Pass, like even on the like more entry level one, then
currently it's not. It's on Ultimate only.
If it's only on Ultimate, okay, right? Then like, yeah, I mean, like that's, I don't know. I think it doesn't diminish the value of Game Pass. I think it actually increases the value of Game Pass because Game Pass has gone up in price. So the idea that like, if I own a game like something like, I don't know, like Baldur's Gate or whatever, right? That's like not on Game Pass, but now I can take advantage of like taking it with me anywhere I go and streaming it to, my Steam Deck or my phone or my pad or whatever, right? Like, yeah, like that's, don't get me wrong, like that's it's a good value. Like that does make a difference. And I think for a lot of gamers, if you're someone who's like traveling a lot or whatever, right? And you've got your Xbox at home and then you want to be able to play your games on the go, like, yeah, like, I mean, it's a really good feature for sure. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, it does, I think in a time where like the cost of Game Pass is going up, people are feeling inflation, there's less, I think, money to go around. Like it's not like it is a, I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, it's a bad value or anything like that, but it's like, I could see it being a thing that people are like, oh, I would love to take advantage of that, but it's a little expensive. Or like,
at the moment, for me, it's been like I'm already paying for it and this is a perk, this is a bonus that I get to try this out. And it seems like it very much is beta. This now seems like it's the next stage for them, that, they're about to launch thousands of additional games. People are going to be interested in accessing their library, that you can buy games on mobile, which you've never been able to do. I wonder if we've got to see yet another tier in the confusing pyramid of Xbox Game Pass tiers. Like, we've got core and standard and PC and Ultimate. Do we have a mobile component now? Like, that's just streaming only, and I'm paying like $4.99 a month just so I can access my games on the go? Because that would be a reasonable, I think, proposition. Where
maybe that's the way you do it. Is like you do have like a budget entry point for taking advantage of this, and it's less about paying for access to the games library, and it's more just like, oh, like you can just stream the games that you own.
Yeah, maybe there's like one or two select games that they want to push me so that I maybe buy the DLC on, for example, and the rest of it I can't access. I mean, or they just open this up so it's on all tiers. So then if I wanted to subscribe to Game Pass Core, I could play those games on my phone or on my Amazon Fire Stick or wherever I want to play them, because it does feel a bit strange to gate that. It made sense when it was just Game Pass, that these were the only games you could play on there were games that you got as part of your Game Pass subscription, and you could play them on your Xbox or you could play them on your PC, and now you could stream them. You could play them on mobile or you could stream them to your console. That made sense. I think once you start opening it up, it makes a little less sense.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, I guess it like it becomes a marketing problem. Right? And like problem in quotes, right? Like it's just like, how do you communicate that, right? Is this adding yet another confusing Xbox tier? Is it, making it just like this is just a perk of Game Pass, and when you get Game Pass, you get this. It's just the thing that you get with Ultimate. I don't know. But like, you do wonder how long the Game Pass Ultimate model even makes sense, right? When it's like, how many of these games are only on PC, right? And it's like, it's really not that many. Like, most of the games are cross-platform, or, there's
There's
PC
actually a lot that are only on Xbox as well. Like, you can't get them on PC.
So it's like, you'd think that, I don't know, like, to me it feels like the goal should eventually be that there's just one, right? And you don't need to pay for Ultimate, and that it's just you're in the Game Pass ecosystem, and if you have Game Pass, you have access to the Game Pass library. But like, maybe that just doesn't make sense, right? Like, maybe that's something that they would like to do, but it's the technology isn't there. But like, if you're gonna be doing this, like, well, you can stream any game that you own, any game that's in the ecosystem to any device. It's like you start wondering, like, well, then why not, right? Like, why can't you just have a more streamlined experience, right? And not have to have like the budget version, the console version, the PC version, the Ultimate one that has everything, and it also includes cloud streaming. I think it just becomes a little bit like muddled in a way that Game Pass used to be very, very simple, and it does feel like we're getting away from that a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, it was a very simple proposition. You pay for Game Pass, you got access to games. Now it's you pay for Game Pass, you also need Game Pass in order to get online, because Live Gold is gone,
right?
And so that became confusing. That was part of Ultimate, and now it's like a separate. It's all kind of rolled under the Game Pass banner. The other thing I could potentially see them doing is going down the ad-supported route. You watch an ad, you gain access to streaming, and you can view it that way. Maybe there's like a credit system that they could operate. I don't know. And maybe they just go, fuck it. We're the most valuable company in the world. We're gonna enable this for free to try and capture a big slice of the market. Come and buy your games and play the ones you've already got, especially if Steam's potentially around the corner about to launch their Android store and bring all of those games to Android. You've potentially got that kind of breathing down your neck, and those games would potentially play natively on an Android device, whereas these are streaming, and we don't know if native games are coming.
Yeah, and I do think that does make sense. Like, I do think that like offering this as a value prop and not a paid service like does make more sense to me, in the same way that like the same way that like smart delivery is something where it's like, this is just a benefit of being on the platform, right? I'm not paying for this service, and the fact that I don't have to pay for it while Sony charges me $10 an upgrade feels really good, and it does, encourage me to buy games on Xbox rather than on PlayStation. So like, that could be an easy way to do this, of like, yeah, like, this is just a thing. Like, if you're in the Game Pass ecosystem, if you're in the Xbox ecosystem, you can stream your games to other devices, and why would you buy your games on PlayStation when you could buy them here and you can play them anywhere? We're so much less restrictive.
It's how it works with movies. Like, I buy a movie on Amazon Prime, or I buy a movie on Apple. I'm not having to continually subscribe every time I want to watch that film. I go and I click play. I've watched The Office, or I've watched 30 Rock a million times, and because I own it and it's in the cloud, and I've streamed it every single time. But I've bought it, and I always have access to it now. And I think maybe they just bake that value into the price at some point. I could see that this launches and requires that Ultimate subscription at launch. But this is kind of leaked plans based on sources that The Verge have got access to, and we don't know what their actual plans are going to be yet. So I'm sure we'll hear in the kind of coming weeks.
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of those things that like they've been circling around this, and then like the mobile stuff for so long that it's like, yeah, I think it's just finally ready to actually hit market.
Well, mobile was one of the big plays for wanting to buy Activision Blizzard. King. It was King that was one of the big things that was kind of propping that deal up. You getting access to Candy Crush, which just prints money. Do you eventually roll Candy Crush into this, and you have your own store, so you're no longer having to run all of your little in-app purchases, microtransactions for Candy Crush through Google servers? You can just run your own Xbox store. People download Candy Crush there instead now.
Yeah,
you're not having to give Google 30% of every single download.
I think that's definitely the plan, right? Like, I mean, based on like what we read above, it's like they're going to start selling their games through their own app. And yeah, I'm sure that like games like that'll still be available on the Google Store or the Apple Store or whatever, right? Because like that's the biggest market. But like, yeah, I'm sure that they want to encourage people to be like, yeah, no, why would you buy your games there? Come buy them on Xbox. It's cheaper. There's a better deal. There's this, there's that, right? Like, now
it's similar to buying a game on Steam or buying it on the Windows Store. You know, do you buy it on Windows Store and it's Play Anywhere and you could potentially play it on your Xbox and your PC, or do you want it in Steam, which has its other perks of you've got achievements, you've got your friends there, you've got your whole other gaming library there.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, I think if you're already in the ecosystem and you have Game Pass, if some of these things then come to Game Pass, then like that's another whole, you know, you're not paying for them. It's like Apple Arcade, right? It's like, oh yeah, I'm already in this ecosystem. Like I pay for a Game Pass subscription so I can play my console games at home. I can play my PC games on my PC. I can play mobile games on the go.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that, especially with having a huge mobile game publisher now. And I would, you know, and the competitors are doing it, right? Bungie announced a new mobile game this week. I'd imagine PlayStation's thinking about it. We've seen them looking at streaming and experimenting with it and talking about partnering up with Microsoft to run their servers in the cloud. They're running Azure, so it's got to be coming. And I know it was one of your predictions as well.
Yeah, I said my prediction was that Xbox would launch Game Pass for mobile games and a mobile game app store. So, I mean, I'm definitely at least getting a half point on that one because they'll have a mobile game store next month.
Are we doing half points this year?
Yeah, we are. There's already half points highlighted.
I know.
If you're not, then I think you got a lot less points to count, my friend.
Yeah, well, it says mobile game app store. I would argue that these potentially are mobile games, console games that are streaming to a mobile, and I'm sure Max will also argue.
It is an app store on mobile devices.
That's not what you said there. You said a mobile game app store.
That is the same thing. If you can play the game on mobile, it's a mobile game.
Not the same.
Yes, it is.
No, it is not. No, it is not. And you know it's not. I can stream Balatro to my phone with Steam Link, or I can buy it from the App
mobile
Store,
store.
The mobile version.
Right.
The mobile version of it, yeah.
Right, which makes it a mobile game because you're playing it on your phone.
It's not the same. It is not the same.
It is absolutely the same.
No.
And you're totally trying to nickel and dime me here, but it's like, bud, if I'm buying the app, if I'm on the Xbox app buying games on my phone to play them on my phone, that's a mobile game store. What are we talking about? That's a marketplace on mobile.
Look, I am with you that they're launching a store because clearly they are. Sarah Bond's announced it, but it's not a mobile game store currently. If I see Candy Crush in there, if I see Call of Duty Mobile in there, then yeah, it's a mobile game store. If it's, you can play your Xbox game library and you can stream it, that's not mobile games. And you know it's not mobile games. And I think everyone in the community is going to know it's not mobile games.
I am happy to argue because I'm sorry. Just because they're letting you... So what? Like, you're telling me if I go and download, like, you know, Fortnite on my app store, it's not a mobile game because you can play it other places?
That's not the same. You're not streaming Fortnite.
No.
You're not actually downloading these games.
You're buying them
there, streaming them. You're buying them, but you're not downloading them. Whereas I'm playing Fortnite Mobile, I'm downloading it on my phone and I'm playing it.
I mean, what with the quote we have here is starting in November, players will be able to play and purchase Xbox games directly from the Xbox app on Android. I mean, come on. Like, what are we talking about here? You can download an Xbox app and there's a store on it where you can buy games. That's a mobile storefront.
It's a mobile storefront, but they're not mobile games. And that's what your prediction said was mobile games.
Okay. Well, we can argue about this one once we have more data, I guess, because y'all are being fucking ridiculous if you think you're going to take that half point away from me for that. Doesn't have mobile in the name. It's not Xbox Mobile, so it doesn't count.
Look, Max, I hope you're listening to this. I hope you just fire off in the comments and tell Pete how wrong he is. While we're looking at the predictions, you said you got another one?
I did get another point. One of my predictions was that Steam Deck was going to launch in Australia, and we just got the official confirmation of that this week after we called it correctly on the Steam Deck podcast. So
nice.
Your boy's doing pretty good.
Well, I also picked up a green one that Valve has released a new game because they have officially now let you play Deadlock. You can download it from.
It's got a store and everything.
Got a store and everything. It's a new game from there.
That's a game.
It's not a re-release. So there you go. The weirdest launch ever. But yeah, there it is. And I think some of my others are going to go green and some of them are going to go red. But we will wait and see till the end of the year.
As of right now, you've got 2.5. Max has 3, and I've got 3.5 if we count the mobile game one. 3 if we don't.
I think this is the closest year yet.
Oh yeah, so far, and there's a couple more of these that we still got 2 or 3 months where some of this could net out, but yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Oh shit! I think I have this point too about PSVR.
We don't know yet because the year's not out.
No,
they may have an event in November, but yeah, your prediction that they're not going to announce a first-party VR2 game. I think you're probably
they just did that
one.
State of Play and they announced 2 third-party games and no first-party games. I'm like, I feel like I got this one. I feel like I'm pretty close.
That's why it's yellow because I think that one's going.
Yeah.
And yeah, Max is potentially getting some more, but he's got some that are just definitely going red. A Zelda remaster or remake will be released. That's not going to happen.
No, I honestly think his big one is going to be the Capcom Pragmata. He's probably going to get that one, so he'll get 4. But I think after that, we might be screwed on, or he might be screwed on that.
Yeah, unless Valve do announce another piece of hardware, which I could see happen, but I think we probably would have had it by now. But stuff like that could be surprises at the Game Awards.
Yeah, right. And the colorways for Valve stuff, that could happen at an event like that.
Well, that says excluding limited edition colorways, so he's not allowed. If they just announce a limited edition colorway,
that's not enough.
He's not allowed it. No.
That'd be a new piece of hardware, right? So that probably won't happen either. Yeah, I don't know. I think you've got at least one more point. That's a lock. I think you're going to get the Xbox Game of the Year exclusive. I think that'll happen.
I really thought Silksong was going to come out, considering it got ratings.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that game, man. I called it then. I was like, I don't think it's coming out this year. I don't know why I felt that way, but I was like, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it's coming. And it's like, yeah,
sports story. And I wonder if it is going to be a sports story scenario where it doesn't live up to Golf Story, and Silksong doesn't live up to Hollow Knight, and they're really worried about how they follow up to one of the most beloved games of all time.
I don't know, because I think it's I don't know that I genuinely think that is a huge risk, or that it's going to come out and underperform necessarily. I think there's a good chance it could, just because of how much hype there's been that and eventually you get go away heat. But I don't know. I do think that what you're saying about them feeling the pressure is real. Is that I think that's why it's taking so long, is their first game was such a big deal. It's the sequel's we don't want a sophomore slump. It's got to live up to the hype, And it's that's tough. That's a tough thing. And I think that there's a good reason that Yacht Club, the Shovel Knight studio, that their first big post Shovel Knight game is not Shovel Knight 2. Because I think that has a level of it's 10 years later, better be fucking good.
I mean, they've also been working on Shovel Knight games for that long.
For 10 years.
They've done the treasure trove of an absolute smorgasbord of Shovel Knight games.
Yeah. It's okay, let's pivot a little bit, do something else.
Yeah.
But I think that helps too. It takes the pressure off, right? It's less of a,
I think it gives you that sense of innovation as well. Guerrilla was pigeonholed into being the Killzone studio, and when they finally got let out to do something else, we ended up with Horizon, which is a phenomenal game, and now probably one of PlayStation's biggest assets.
For sure, yeah. So yeah, I think you're probably right there. That's why it keeps slipping. Is that they want to really cross their T's and dot their I's because their first game was such a slam dunk.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it doesn't play out that way. I hope it comes out and lives up to the expectation because they've just spent so much time on it. Like, you'd hate to see that. So I want to keep the conversation about Xbox's all-digital future here rolling in just a sec. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of October. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and Also Boobies, Voodoo Vic, Ty the Dude, and Waka Hula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You all the realest to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to go check out Nintendo Noise or the Steam Deck podcast, if you want to join our Discord and keep the talk going between episodes, if you want to go above and beyond and show your support over on Patreon, you can do all that and much more over at flipscreen.games. That's the website. Head over there, click on some stuff, however you choose to get involved or show your support. It helps us out quite a bit, and we thank you oh so much. So this is another little story that I think ties back to this main topic pretty well, right? Which is that Xbox, the discless Series X has started going on sale this week, and it is now, I think, just kind of another, I don't know, it feels like yet another example of like Xbox trying to broadly move away from physical media, right? We reported earlier this year that there were a couple retailers that are not going to be carrying Xbox games anymore, that like Xbox, physical game sales have been down, even though software overall is not, in a bad, like people are buying games on Xbox, but they're overwhelmingly not buying physical games on Xbox from the look of it. So the idea that, they're kind of doubling down with this new Series X model that is bigger and badder. It's got 2 terabytes of, storage on the hard drive. It's, got a couple other new bells and whistles, new cooling, some things like that. But yeah, it's, I don't know. It's interesting to see this happening right on the heels of this other story, or vice versa, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of feel like they're very related. I mean, this is the first hardware revision we've seen the Series X get. Obviously, the PlayStation's had a few, and it already had the die shrink on the system on a chip. Xbox is now following suit. This is now on a new 6-nanometer process, which means that the Xbox is run a lot more efficiently. Austin Evans actually did the teardown and the testing on this because he managed to get hold of one of these new digital editions and also the 2 terabyte special edition and compared all 3 with the original Series X from 2020. And they ran around 10 watts less than the original, which doesn't seem significant. But if you consider that these new Xboxes are probably what Microsoft are running in their data center, those 10 watts of power that they're saving is going to significantly add up for Microsoft. If they've got thousands of these Xboxes running in a data center somewhere, that's thousands and thousands of probably kilowatts that they're saving in terms of energy every single day as people stream Xbox games. And as they ramp up to allow people to play their own Xbox games, they're going to need more and more of these consoles because it was only a few thousand that they had the capacity in order to accommodate that we heard about a few months ago. That's presumably going to be a lot more as people can buy games on their mobile.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, right, like 16 watts is, it adds up when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of them in a warehouse somewhere that are streaming data, So yeah, I mean, the even that slight increase in efficiency is something that I'm sure that, yeah, that's a huge motivating factor here, right? Or at least they're these two initiatives seem to be working in tandem.
Yeah, and I mean, the switch to digital, I think I'm increasingly convinced that the next generation for both consoles is probably going to be digital only. PlayStation's obviously been a real driving force towards that. They had a digital only PlayStation 5 from launch. You now can't buy a disc PlayStation 5. You have to buy the disc separately.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think it makes sense for a lot of reasons, right? Like, I think by and large, like, people are buying more digital than they are physical. Like, that's, you know, a trend that's only been increasing over the last couple of years, and I think that that probably was only exacerbated by lockdown and, you know, people being like, all right, well, let me just get it on the storefront rather than waiting for it to show up or whatever, right? And you know, there's a lot of examples now of like, you know, something like I can't think of the last game that did it, but Life is Strange is coming out in a couple of weeks, and they're doing like a 2-week early access on digital, right? And like there are, you know, obviously like if you were to buy, you know, your digital Xbox games and like that lets you stream them in the cloud, like there's all these things where it's like, you know, maybe that's true for physical games as well. You can just like activate it in your library.
I don't think it is though. I don't think you will be able to access them from the library. I mean, you can obviously stream your own console, but you're not physically at home to swap the disc out if you want to play a different game.
So that's I guess where it gets, you know, interesting, right? Where it's like I think that there are advantages to buying digital that are kind of like unrelated to what your attitude is about digital versus physical. And then when you think about the fact that like I think the value of physical games is getting less and less, right? Because like the disc itself doesn't even have all the data you need. So it's like if you're one of those people who's like, well, I want a physical copy so that I actually own my games because of digital rights management. It's like, well, you don't really own them anyway, right? Like all it would take is for them to be like, oh, we're taking the game offline. It doesn't have this functionality anymore, like, or you need to be able to ping servers. Like, there's all these scenarios where it's like having the physical copy of the game doesn't actually mean that you own the game necessarily.
I mean, just like a Concord.
Right, exactly. Like, that was a game you could buy a physical copy of. It's like it just doesn't exist anymore, right? And then there are exceptions to that, right? Like Astrobot was a game that like you could basically play it 100% without the day one patch, and you'd just be missing out on a couple little.
How do I play that on my PS6 if it doesn't have a disc drive? You know, that there's no way to do that. Whereas if I bought it digitally, that follows me. You know, I've got games on my Series X that I bought way back on my 360 that I can still play now on my Series X. Presumably, I'll be able to play those games on my mobile as and when the streaming comes out, and I'll be able to play that on the next Xbox, whatever that may be.
So I feel like, you know, kind of the big holdout in my mind always for physical games, right, was like, obviously there's internet infrastructure, but like that becomes less and less of an issue over time, right? Like there's less and less places that are like nickel and diming you and throttling your internet. Like it's you know, most people are accustomed to downloading content. It's not really a big deal. So then it really becomes like, you know, the question of like whether or not like you are going to be able to like have that advantage that you think of with physical media. And I think we're behind that at this point with games. Like it's getting less and less, you know, it's less and less of a sticking point for you to own that stuff. So then you also have to think of like, well, what was the reason to have price parity, right, between digital and physical versions? And it was because console manufacturers relied on shelf space at big box stores to sell consoles, right? And that's not that important anymore, right? Like obviously now the direct to order market is a lot more significant. Like PlayStation and Xbox like will sell you the console directly from their website, and that was something that like wasn't an option, you know, a generation ago, 2 generations ago.
And that's seemingly like their preferred route now as well. Like we saw with the special edition PlayStation, you could only get it from PlayStation.
Right.
You couldn't get it anywhere else.
So then you think about the fact that, you know, every big box retailer, right, that they take advantage of as a sales partner, like for selling consoles, they have a robust online store. So if they want to sell Xboxes or PlayStations or whatever, like, do it on our terms. And if they don't want to sell it, that's not going to hurt you anymore, because you can still sell it on Amazon and you can still sell it directly from your website. And everybody is trained to go and buy shit that way now. And it's not a weird thing to buy a console on Amazon. It's like, yeah, sure, whatever, par for the course, right? Like I bought my Xbox on Amazon because I could find one. and it's like, okay, great. Like, that was where I got one. So, like, when you start thinking about, physical sales are down, like, Xbox in general, right, was like taking up all the shelf space for stuff that's not really moving. It's like, I don't know that it makes sense anymore for them to care about big box stores as an avenue for selling a video game console the way that you used to have to. And if you can get to a point,
it kind of feels archaic, It feels like the Blockbuster to the Netflix. It's kind of like,
yep.
why would I go to a store and pick up a disc? And I've been a big proponent of physical media, and I usually buy my games physically. But I can see that the writing's on the wall for it in the same way that the writing was on the wall for the CD and the writing was on the wall for the DVD. It's kind of feels like that's the way of the dinosaur, and digital media is the way it's going.
And like, not for nothing, like, I think you're seeing a lot of people backtrack on that now because of how shitty streaming services are. And that, like, like Spotify is extremely predatory towards artists, and, actors don't get residuals from streamers. And we have examples of like HBO, merging with Discovery. And then you have like all of these TV shows that like get removed from the service and there's no physical media. So now they're basically just lost. And I don't think that that's a good thing. I don't think we should be wanting that. But like, the reality is that I think like, yeah, it is more convenient. And especially with video games where, you're buying a lot of software and you want to have multiple games ready and up to, it's just like, yeah, like it's generally a better value prop for you as a consumer to buy digital. And it's much better for the console manufacturers for you to buy digital because they don't have to waste money on manufacturing discs and putting them in shops and then letting the Amazons and Walmarts and Targets of the world take their cut. Right. And like, yeah, like if they could get us all fully digital, that would be better for them, and I don't know that you can argue that there's a major advantage to physical media for video games anymore because of how dependent we are on stuff like day one patches and, like constantly updating the game to add new content or to fix bugs or whatever, right? Like, we're way, way past the days of a game goes gold, it's on a disc, it's on a cartridge, and you plug it in and it just works, right? Like, that's not been the case for 2 console generations at this point, right? Like
3, I would argue. I mean, since Xbox 360, Xbox One, and now with the Xbox Series X, it's been the same.
Sure, yeah. So,
the difference with the 360 is you could play games on the disc. You didn't have to install it, and so it didn't take up your hard drive space. I mean, that was one nice thing, but that's not even a thing anymore. You have to install the games that you're going to play, even if they're on the disc. And like you said, half the time, they're not always on the disc. It's a tiny chunk of the data, and you've got to download the rest. Otherwise, it won't even play. And if there's an online component, well, you better be sure that you're going to be downloading content for the rest of your life.
Exactly. So it's like, even as somebody who is now I'm kind of moving back the other direction with like movies and CDs and stuff where I'm like, I am buying physical copies of the stuff I actually want because I don't want to be at the whim of some streamer or some other like rights holder who's going to decide that this thing that I don't own anymore or whatever, right? Like I'm not interested in engaging in that.
Those are different. Those like mediums are different. You can't stop people watching a DVD or putting a CD in a drive because the data's on the disc. Like you said, that's not the case with games.
Right, and I think the difference there, too, is that, like, they don't get patches, right? Like, you don't get a patch for,
unless it's Star Wars and he keeps re-releasing it.
We don't have to talk about that. But you know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, like, I bought this movie on Blu-ray, and as long as Blu-ray is the standard, then, like, great, right? Like, it's like, it's a quality of format thing, right? Like, I have DVDs that I like when I moved and my internet wasn't turned on, I like popped in an old DVD that I found of like the Simpsons movie. I hadn't watched it like since it came out, and I was like, oh man, this is in like 540. It's like it's such a low res DVD. But yeah, so it's like unless you're talking about something like that, it's like, well, yeah, the content is what the content is. Whereas like, that's just not how it is anymore, and we're so far removed from when video games were that way. That yeah, I think I'm with you. I think that's probably where we're going to be by next generation. I think it's kind of where we already are now. Like, I think if they thought that they could get away with it this gen, they probably would have. And the fact that we're halfway through this generation and they're already like, okay, so nobody cares if we do this. It's like, yeah, why wouldn't that be the case next time around?
Yeah, I mean, PlayStation proved that nobody really cares that they did this, you know.
Nope. As long as they sell a
this,
disc drive so you can play the stuff you already bought, it's like, who gives a fuck, right? And like, all you have to do for the PS6 is support the PS5 disc drive, and then you never have to do it again. It's over.
Or you think they only do it for one gen and then that's it? It's like, come on now.
I don't know. You know? That's a huge question. And I mean, maybe it's as simple as like creating a system where you can just be like, well, I own the disc and I have a code or whatever. And like,
they should have, I swear, maybe I dreamt this, but wasn't there that kind of system for like the PSP Go where I could like send in my UMDs for my PSP and they would like transfer
like upload them for you? I don't know, maybe.
I'm like sure that was a thing. I must have dreamt it if not.
But yeah, I think unless they offer something like that, yeah, they'll probably just keep supporting the same old device so that you can play your old games, but that line's gonna have to come at some point, right? And I think those of us who have switched over primarily to digital or all digital are gonna not have that problem. Like, I bought a physical copy of Astrobot because it came out when I didn't have internet and I wanted to play it, and I am thinking about that now of like, oh shit, now I'm like stuck with this physical copy that like I might not be able to play.
You could trade it in and buy it when it's on sale on PlayStation. You know, there's solutions to it. It's not ideal, but at least the trade-in option does exist there
for now.
Yeah, true.
Like, how long
you can always shove it on eBay?
Sure, yeah, but it's like, I mean, I don't know how GameStop still exists, and I don't know how it survives much longer if this is where we're going.
In the UK pretty much doesn't exist. They've stopped trade-ins now. We've only got CEX. That's the only place that will take games now.
We still have GameStop all over the place, but like they're closing. Like they're like, you know, when I moved to Philly, right? Like in my zip code, there were 2 that were like literally basically next to each other.
I remember this because didn't you go to 2 in order to get your PlayStation, or was it your Xbox?
The PlayStation, I think they had already closed that one by now. It might have been another pre-order that you're thinking of, but yeah, because that was one where I literally just drove over and was like, "You guys taking pre-orders?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." And I was like, "Great." It's like, just like wrote my name down on a piece of paper. He's like, "You get one, great." It's like, awesome, fuck yeah. Pre-orders don't start until tomorrow. Works for me. But yeah, literally, they were like right across from each other. So it's like I would go to one and then run over to the other one if they didn't have what I wanted. And like, there's another one that's less than a mile away, and now we have those 2. We had those 2. One of them closed. Now the one that was closest to my house closed down. So now there's just that one, and it's like, I mean, I don't know.
So many mattress shops can stay open, but GameStop can't. That's what I'm learning.
It's sad. We used to be a proper country. But yeah, you know, I mean, I think it just speaks to the times, right? And that like this is increasingly the way that people are engaging with things, and that what they care about is access, not ownership. And
which I think they have for a long time been conditioned to that because of music and movies and TV shows.
I wonder though, because like I do feel like you're seeing that conversation kind of like start to have a reckoning as you see like.
I think it's because we're just like, for fuck's sake, it's turned back into cable again. Mm-hmm. You know, like we're now paying for Disney Plus and Hulu, and we're also paying for Apple and Amazon and Netflix, and it's just like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like we fixed this. Netflix was the one service we had to pay for. Now we've got to pay for 7 again.
Yeah, and it's like that's a whole other like deeper conversation about like, you know, there was a time where everyone was like, oh, Netflix is going to die, right? And then it's like, oh no, actually they're still the only one that's like working. And so it's like, can the market not support all these things, or is it like a amount of options? Probably, you know, it's like, because I don't know that everybody can win this, you know, this race, right? And that like every one of these ecosystems can like make this jump, but like I don't know. I think it does, like, it is something that games has been very slowly reckoning with, because there are a lot of old heads like who want physical media and want things to be the way that they've been. And I think we're just at a point where like that number is just increasingly a smaller and smaller number of people that are like, this is important to me, or that the the quality of what you're getting for that is just not what it used to be anymore. So even if you are someone who's like, I really care about physical games, it's like, you're that minority opinion is getting increasingly marginalized in the market.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the next generation is. I feel like that's going to be one of the most interesting generations in decades. Like Xbox One and Series X generations have not been that interesting, and I feel like the next one, with how I feel like Xbox and PlayStation are going to be completely divergent from one another, and then we've got Nintendo in the mix with the Switch too, and it's just like going to be crazy. And then there's the PC side. Like, are these handheld PCs going to continue to take off and become more mainstream as people realize that they're a good value prop and potentially they become more usable? There's a lot there. I think it's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I think the thing that I am struck by right now so much is like, it's hard to predict what the next couple of years of video games look like because there's all this like massive technological advancement, but it's also at the same time as I think, we're kind of coming to the end of a golden age for video games, right? And like, that doesn't mean to say that like video games are in trouble or that they're gonna die or something like that, but like, I do think that we kind of saw an unprecedented level of growth in video games and interest around them and the culture around them and everything. And I think that that was always going to plateau at some point, and that, people who are interested in the hobby might fall off and yet so like, who knows, right? But like, it is interesting to think about, like, we're having this potentially massive paradigm shift in the way consoles are bought and sold, the way games are bought and sold, like what people's priorities are, the shelf life of games, like how much people are willing to spend, like all those things seem to really be in flux for the first time in a long time, because I think, post the, housing crisis recession in like 2008, 2009, right? Like there was a relative boom period where folks had money to spend, and especially during lockdown, like people were unprecedentedly spending on video games, and like that's over, right? And it's like, I do think we're going to see like publishing dry up a little bit. We're going to see less risk. We're going to see less games as a service. We're going to see more experimentation with delivery systems and like all these other things that are trying to find like, what is the new normal if the traditional paradigm of buying a box and buying a $70 game, right? If that's antiquated, then what is the future of monetizing this industry that has kind of in the last couple of years been spoiled in terms of like profits, right? Where it's like the way you used to monetize a game was you sold a game. Now it's you sell it, there's a season pass, there's DLC, there's microtransactions, there's this, there's that. And I think a lot of those wells are drying up. And I think that that's going to really force big publishers and developers to reckon with how do you operate a video game business with less cash flow and with less of these big, billion-dollar payouts, because there's just less money to go around, and there's more conservative attitudes from players because they have less money to spend.
Well, there's also fewer players. Microsoft is snapping them all up. There's going to be potentially less innovation there. You've can be more conservative when you're one of the only people around.
Well, and you have to be, right? Because that's you don't have to be. I think that's, MBA brain kind of nonsense, but I think it's a reason it happens, right? Like when you're small and agile, you're more able and willing to take risks, and the bigger the boat gets, the longer it takes to turn. So, yeah, it's interesting to see Microsoft really innovating when it comes to hardware and like the way people engage with video games and like trying to think outside the box and push things forward. Whereas like on the software side of things, it's like, it feels like they're really struggling and the other guys are much better at innovating, right? Nintendo is obviously, I would say, much better at innovating. And, for as much as we criticize PlayStation for maybe being a one-trick pony, that trick works pretty well. And it works every time.
When they deviate from it, it doesn't work. Look at Concord.
Well, look at Helldivers, though.
That was a pony we didn't want to play.
Yeah, but look at Helldivers.
Yeah, that's true.
That worked. That was a huge diversion.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but that was just them giving some cash to someone else to make it. You know, they didn't buy a studio that put out a dreadful game. But yeah,
true. They did buy them though, right? I think they own them now.
They did. No, they don't. They don't own the Helldivers team.
No, really?
I don't think so. No,
I
they
could have sworn
published it. They might have bought them after the game was published, but
I could have sworn that they bought them right before they published it. But maybe I'm thinking of one of these other teams that they snapped up recently.
Don't think so. No.
But yeah, I think it's definitely going to be an interesting time over this next generation or so, because I think that the last like generation and change, right? Like I think since the onset of the PS4, Xbox One, Wii U generation, we've been waiting for a big paradigm shift and waiting for a post console future and a post this and and it's just never come. And like the only thing that we saw was like, yeah, people's attitudes aren't changing, just more people are buying stuff. And now it does feel like, whether it's because our attitudes are actually changing or we have less money to spend, or like the powers that be are forcing us to buy things in different ways, that like, yeah, you got to imagine that there's going to be some big shakeups in the next, decade, generation, whatever you want to say. Mm-hmm. But who knows? I mean, I think that always seems like an obvious thing when you're in a recession and there's all this pressure, and like it seemed like the video game industry had to change after the Xbox 360 PS3 generation, and of course we know that it didn't, right? It just evolved a little bit. And I guess that's the thing I'm most interested to see, is like, is this a bump in the road? And it seems so drastic because of how stable and growth oriented the last decade was, that like any amount of big layoffs and cancellations and failures is like, whoa, like what the fuck? But like, maybe that's just how it netted out, right? That it's like, yeah, like it couldn't be all up forever, right? So it's like, is this a crash or is this just us settling back to normal? Who knows?
I'm not sure. That's up to Wall Street to decide on that one. But we'll wait and see. I'm like I said, I think this is a really interesting time for video games, and it's definitely one to look at for the next decade.
For sure. So let us know what you guys think down below. Are you going to try to take advantage of this Xbox Cloud system? Is that something you're excited about? Do you think that makes you more inclined to want to keep your Game Pass subscription? Is that something that is kind of justifying that price increase for you? Or are you feeling like this is great and everything, but it's not worth the money? I'm not the use case for this. It's not enough for me to want to spend $20 a month. I'm interested to hear from you guys and other players about whether or not you see this being something that could make its way into your rotation in a meaningful way. And like, how good would it have to be for it to be something that you actually wanted to pay for and use, So write in and let us know. FlipScreen.games. That's the website. Go over there. Check out our sister shows, Nintendo Noise and the Steam Deck podcast. Write into the show. Get your thoughts right on the air. Join the Discord. Keep the conversation rolling between episodes over there. However you choose to get involved or show your support, FlipScreen.games. Thank you all for joining us. I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.